This is TWiT.
There's a new book just came out, which, by the way, I highly recommend, by Scott Shapiro, who is both a computer scientist and a philosopher. But his new book is called Fancy Bear Goes Phishing: The Dark History of the Information Age in 5 Extraordinary Hacks. It starts with Robert Tappan Morris's very famous internet worm. The first time we saw a worm take the internet down way back in, I think it was 1983. Highly recommend the book. The very interesting description of the Mirai worm and the story behind it and the kid who created it. He was a Rutgers student who was pissed off because only upper class computer science majors could get into the computer science classes. So he DDoSed the entire system and brought it to its knees. He was kind of a wild child and eventually came up with the Mirai botnet, which was the very first, I think, DDoS as a service system where script kiddies who didn't know anything about DDoSing could rent the hardware to DDoS their favorite target. He eventually got caught. The FBI caught him. They decided not to send him to jail, but instead to enlist his help, as often happens in fighting other hackers. And he's now, he says, reformed and is very grateful to the FBI agent who caught him for teaching him the right way. It's a highly great story, but that's not why I'm bringing it up, because Scott, and I may not, this may be beyond my pay grade, maybe yours too, maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody will know. But Scott says, because these are essentially, our computers are essentially Turing machines, which means they're designed in a way that they can solve any problem, arbitrary problem. They have the general purpose hardware to do that. They cannot be secured. Jennifer Ouellette's article in Ars Technica is Cybersecurity an Unsolvable Problem. Scott Shapiro says, yes. Any thoughts, Christina?
I mean, yeah, I think that I don't think that it's one of those things. It is one of those problems that I don't think that you can ever permanently solve, right? Like, I think that it's one of those that is always a moving target. And so possibly when we reach the age of quantum, yes, you could maybe have, these systems that they're not going to be hackable or whatnot. I don't really believe that. I think that it is it's always kind of a moving target. And this is why good security funds, firms rather, can make so much money, because this is an ongoing thing. The targets and the things that are easy exploits today are not necessarily going to be the same exploits tomorrow. And so you can't just rest on your laurels. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if this ever goes away. I think this is why we have to be vigilant, but we have to kind of expect, or not expect, but we have to have the awareness that there is the potential with any of the things that we use that it could be compromised. And that's why it's important to run updates and to, stay aware of things and to, pay attention and to audit code and have third parties auditing, your code as much as possible when it makes sense, to try to prevent the fallout from this stuff.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is social engineering. I mean, even if we could make perfect hardware and perfect software, which we can't, but even if we could, we can't make perfect people.
100%.
And there's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah.
And it's hard. As we're going to talk about later when we get into the situation, what happened to me, even very tech savvy people can be at risk of social engineering because the social engineers are very, very smart.
And absolutely. And the thing is that the thing with social engineering is that you're right, very tech savvy people can still be taken in. That happens all the time. But B, many times the people who are socially engineered are not us. It is customer service representatives for companies that control access to our devices. And so, that's how most people get SIM shipped. It has nothing to do with whatever policies or security they have in place on their devices. It's just getting the customer service person from, one of those companies to saying enough things to getting them to pass things over, sometimes without even having information from the user themselves. So you're right. There is the people problem that I don't think we can ever solve, even if we were able to build, fully secure hardware devices.
And to expand on what you're saying is computer security is one area where you can be completely innocent. So, for example, if your only crime were to have shopped at Target right before their systems were hacked, your information was abridged. You didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing you could have possibly done to protect yourself except live under a rock.
Right.
Yet you were vulnerable. And that's not true with most things. I mean, it would be like an airplane falling out of the sky and hitting you. At least if you die in a plane crash, probably you bought the ticket on the plane. And maybe, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but
you were at least involved. You at least had some agency in the decision to get on the plane to begin with, and you understood that there was a risk. No, you're exactly right. I mean, I with the Target hack, it's so funny. It was like Target, it was Chipotle. There were like 3 of them in a row that I was victim of, and I had to change my credit card like 3 times in like a 14-month period of time, which is very frustrating to then have to update all of your recurring charges. But you're right. Just and you could say, okay, we'll use cash. In most circumstances, that is not a reasonable expectation for most people, right? That is not a reasonable thing that goes on. It is impossible in many places.
Try buying a drink at an airplane with cash.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other difference is that Target suffers essentially no liability, no accountability, whereas if there's a plane crash, there's a lot of money changes hands, and there's a lot of damage to the carriers. We've given people who do software basically a complete pass on liability, and that doesn't seem right.
You're right.
I understand it's complicated, and I understand all these things about how software is different, but and it's the supply chain of software is insane. The whole, but somehow the technology industry has persuaded. It's pretty amazing that they've done it. They've persuaded legislators that doesn't matter how badly they behave, they have no liability for what they do wrong. It's something's got to change there.
Actually, you guys, you don't have to read the book now because you came to the exact conclusion. Shapiro said, I actually wrote this book 3 times. The first time I just wrote about the code and the hackers. And then I realized, well, there's a human element to all of this. So he rewrote it. And then he said, I realize there's a third element. There's a philosophical element to this. This is an interview from Ars Technica. The interviewer talks about the science, and this goes back to our AI conversation. The scientific community in various disciplines has struggled with this in the past. There's an attitude of, we're just doing the research. It's just a tool. It's morally neutral. Scott says that, in fact, you cannot talk about hacking in a neutral way. He says, I'm a philosopher, so my day job is teaching that. But it's a problem throughout all of STEM, the idea that tools are morally neutral. You're just making them, and it's up to the end user to use it in the right way. He says that's a reasonable attitude to have if you live in a culture that's doing the work of explaining why these tools ought to be used in one way rather than another. But when we have a culture that doesn't do that, and this kind of is also what you teach, Dan, then it becomes a very morally problematic activity. We're now seeing a lot of hand-wringing about AI. We always see hand-wringing about every single new technology. There's the techno-utopians and there's the techno-dystopians. But a couple of years later, usually the cooler heads prevail. So he said it's important when you're talking about hacking to include the fact that it's morally reprehensible, that it's wrong and it's bad. He says you're not going to get rid of it because as long as you got humans, your cybersecurity is not primarily a technological problem that requires primarily an engineering solution. It's a human problem that requires an understanding of human behavior. Hacking is about humans, and he's calling for the death of solutionism because we do kind of come from that point of view that, we can fix this. We can solve this. So go ahead.
To Dan's point, I mean, I agree that legislators need to wake up and be more aware of what's going on. But there's also, Dan, as you know, well-intentioned legislation that's bad. Communications Decency Act was one example going back to 1998 or 1996. This Arkansas law that is going to essentially ban minors from using social media without parental consent. Also a Utah law. There's so much dystopian, but over-regulation because the regulators don't understand what's effective and what isn't.
Right.
And so that's what worries me whenever Washington or now increasingly state legislators are getting their mitts on technology, is they really don't understand what they're regulating and what the real dangers are. And one of the reasons why I started SafeKids.com and later Connect Safely was, and again, we're very imperfect ourselves, but at least to try to create sort of a conversation around the relationship between industry, government, and consumers as to how we can use this technology in a more safe manner. We will never claim that we'll ever reach absolute safety, but make it safer. It requires a lot of I hate to say it takes a village because that's become trite, but it really does take a village.
There's no question that the problems that we can create by misguided regulation are serious and that we have to be careful as we do this stuff. But my only point in this context was that we have given a single collection of people in our economy an exemption from liability for egregious misconduct. And that doesn't seem right to me. I think we could start there and
I
work
think
on
you're
that.
right. I think you're right. I would point out, and I completely agree with you, is that the government itself is often the one who leaks information. There have been numerous government hacks of databases and whatnot, and they also should not be exempt from those things. It is an interesting thing. I think about Equifax and the fact that most people who were impacted by that, again, we weren't even compensated like $20. We didn't get anything.
In fact, we were invited to spend more money with Equifax.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I was like, why would I give you any money? Why would I trust anything that you've done? And in that case, and I think what's interesting too, if you didn't want to, to Larry's point, it's a difficult problem to solve, but I feel like there are some instances where it is flat out from any other circumstance, it would be pure negligence. Equifax being a great example. There are some supply chain types of attacks and other attacks where it can truly say, this was not something that we could conceive of happening because we didn't have control over what ultimately impacted our systems. But there are other instances where, you're running outdated systems and you're not holding things up the way that you should. You're not doing the basic due diligence, and those companies or still get government contracts, or the government themselves are still able to force us to use their systems, and we have no recourse. And it's very
Southwest
frustrating.
Airlines.
There ought to be a corporate extinction. Corporate extinction level events ought to be more common for this kind of stuff. And the fact that the credit agencies do what they do and are notoriously incompetent, willfully incompetent.
Yes.
Because they don't see the point in spending the money to do it right, and they have a point. No one does anything about it when they do it wrong. I guess if you're looking at their shareholder value, hey, screw the public. It's worth we make more money doing it that way, and nobody holds us accountable. It's what a grift. It's amazing.
Hey folks, I'm Ant Pruitt and I have a question for you. How do you think your hardworking team, with a Club TWiT corporate subscription plan, of course, show your appreciation and reward your tech team with a subscription to Club TWiT? Keep everyone informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech. With the Club TWiT subscription, they get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. And they also get access to our members-only Discord, access to exclusive outtakes and behind the scenes footage and special content like the fireside chats that I enjoy hosting. Plus, they also get shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. So go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.